Welcome to the Talk Shop.
All right, everybody. Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode of the Talk Shop.
Yes.
Chimdi, how are you doing, man?
I'm good, man. It's been a busy day, a disappointing day towards the end, but you know why.
Oh no, is this a soccer thing? I knew it.
No,
I knew it.
No.
Mm.
We don't
bad.
talk about that here.
It was
We don't talk about
bad.
that here.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm good, man. Everyone's good. How are you? How's Amara? How's PJ?
We're good. He's I say we're good, but if I look tired, it's because he's decided the last couple nights not to sleep that well. Sure, we found out he was hungry, but then it turns out he wasn't hungry, and we're like, anyway, he's not sleeping well, so I'm not sleeping well, but we move regardless.
Ugh. Oh, sorry, man. I haven't experienced that at night. For some reason, Kaima is very scheduled. Like even if she doesn't go to bed, we put her down between 7 and 7:30, and she stays in bed making her noise in her room till she sleeps, like just babbling to herself. So thankfully, we don't have any issues with that. Now we can just sit here and watch TV and do whatever we want to do. But as you guys can see, we have a guest, Miss Tayo Bero.
Hi.
Introduce yourself to the Talk Shop crew.
Well, I'm Tayo. I live in Toronto. I'm a journalist. So I mostly do writing and radio producing. So my 9 to 5 is in radio production. But I do a lot of freelance writing as well. So yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know the radio production part.
Yeah, that's my regular hustle.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Nice. Very interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, welcome. We definitely wanted to have you on because you have in addition to the radio hosting now, we think that your career and your things you do are very, very interesting. So we wanted to have you on. So yeah, thank you for gracing us with your presence.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Quick background, like many of our guests, I've known Tayo since she was very, very tiny.
I was this big.
Yeah, and Bernie, I don't understand. Was she not there? Were you not there when she was there?
Oh, did you go to Loyola?
He did. Yeah, Bernie went to Loyola.
I did. When were you there?
I was there in 2004. That was my just.
Yeah,
I left.
Bernie became in. Oh yeah, he left in SS1. So
I left December 2003.
Oh yeah. I keep thinking it was different, but anyways, yeah. So she went to Loyola too, and that's how we know each other essentially. But I really like what you're doing. The different articles I see that you write and I read, and different things you're doing. And Bernie agreed based on Twitter and Instagram and stuff he knows. So we wanted to have you on. So just based on that, just I guess to start, just give us a little bit of background on what you do and your career. I didn't know the radio part, so you're gonna have to educate me on that. But yeah.
Well, most of what I do is my 9 to 5 stuff, which is the radio thing. So that's what I'm doing, usually day to day, and then the writing stuff I kind of do on the side. So the radio production, I work for our public broadcaster here in Canada, the CBC. So I started out producing actually just doing daily news. So current affairs, whatever was on the actual hard news stuff. But now I'm what are we now, 2021? So I'm 5 years in now. So I'm doing documentary, more long form documentary style stuff, which is really cool. And I'm getting a chance to really build out stories like full length documentaries and stuff, which I really like, because the news can be news production can be really quick pace. It's the news of the day. You have to know what's happening right now today, and that's the thing for the day, and then the next day you're on to something else. So I'm really liking just being able to be thoughtful and produce long documentaries and do fun things like that. And then my writing stuff, which you guys are probably more familiar with, I tend to write about race and Blackness, and of course, womanhood, feminism, all that good stuff. But I'm kind of, for the most part, I'm like on the race beat. So a lot of the time it's like, stuff about like Blackness, Black people. And I also write a column in Teen Vogue, which is mostly about pop culture, film, TV, music. And a lot of it is also kind of holding public figures and celebrities like accountable in a way. Like that's what it turns out to be. So yeah, I'm enjoying all of it.
Bernie likes that part, especially one article you wrote. We'll get to
Nice.
we'll get to that. But
yeah.
actually, my question that you brought up. So, are you in production, or are you in like in part in the radio part? That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. So in terms of radio, like I am a producer. So that means like coming up like story ideation. So coming up with the actual like stories, like in news, that would mean like looking through the news wires of the day and figuring out like, okay, what stories do we need to have on our news show every day? Now for documentary is more of me like coming up with ideas of like stories I want to tell, or like important issues that we can put into documentary formats. So it's, like I said, it's like ideation, coming up with the ideas, booking the guests or the actual interviews, writing the host scripts, editing the scripts, being there, like actual producing. So like being in the studio, well now the virtual studio, when the host is doing the actual interview, and then post-production, of course. So editing, mixing, putting everything together, and then
you do that too?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like all the whole nine. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting journey. I've really enjoyed, like radio was something that kind of happened to me. I didn't think I would be at this point in my career, like producing radio, because it was like, I thought I would be writing, like only writing, because that was something I've always wanted to do. So I'm really glad I'm able to still write on the side. But the radio thing was actually something that like kind of happened to me because I did my internship when I finished journalism school in radio. So I just kind of continued from there.
So okay, let's elaborate on that. Let's elaborate on that a little bit, because I'm very, very curious. Like, you know, radio is one of those things that people go, radio is dead, but hey, now we have podcasts and like apps. I think it's seeing a resurgence. So just talk to me a little bit about the internship, because it's one of those things that's been around forever. People are always curious as to how someone gets a radio gig. So like, touch on that a little bit more.
Yeah. So in terms of radio, I would say like, I mean, here in Canada, like and in the States as well, like terrestrial radio is still very big. Like people still get in their car and like turn on the radio, or like use a lot of news sites now, or like broadcasters will have their own apps. So the same way like you have the podcasting, like the Apple podcasting app, they'll have their own listening app where you can listen to the shows. So I think there's still a big audience for like actual like terrestrial radio. It's just like that audience I think is getting older, like a bit older and older. And now there's more people, I would say like the younger generation is doing more of like podcasting, like you said, and things like that. So it's pretty interesting that way, because that also informs what kinds of stories you tell, right? Because you have to speak to the audience that is already there, but at the same time balance that with like, okay, what do people need to know? So there's a lot of like editorial decision making that goes into that. But in terms of my internship, like I said, I went to journalism school, so I had to do an internship. So I landed an internship at the corp where I work now, and I did that. Like it was pretty much like, well, okay, I won't say too much about the internship. It was good. It was great. But I will say, like, I wasn't doing what I'm doing now while I was in my internship. Definitely not. So it was very much like kind of low level, like helping out with stuff. And then after I finished my internship, I was asked to like come back on a trial basis to the corp to just like see if I was a good fit for like an actual producing role. And then, or like in my, I guess at my level, it's called associate producer. So to see if I would be able to do like an associate producing role. And then, I came back and it worked out. And I guess the rest is history, because I've been there since.
Nice. So your documentaries are audio documentaries?
They're all radio documentaries, yeah.
Okay. Because I don't necessarily know how that works, but then again, I can understand. I guess I can visualize it, or think about what it entails.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's very similar to like TV docs that you would watch. Except that I think with radio, you have like less to work with in terms of like how people are engaging. So they're not just listening and watching, but now the only thing they're doing is listening. So you have to do a lot to kind of build a story that's engaging and that keeps like the listener in the story. But also that can create those images that they're not getting because they're not seeing the thing on TV.
Yeah. Very interesting. I mean, I did you always know from? Well, you probably didn't. You just said you got the internship and you wanted to write more. So that's what you said actually. So my question made no sense. But yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, I haven't met anyone in production. I'm very curious as to how that whole process works in terms of, you said it entails writing the scripts and stuff like that. And I guess because it's radio, you have people that you actually literally write down what someone's gonna say in a way that they can read it smoothly, and there's things in there that you input that let them know that, okay, I guess it would be like an acting script. It describes what the person's doing. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So that's pretty. I mean, the reason why I asked is because how much different is it from actual visual production? And
Right.
do you have any experience in visual production? Would you pivot to that at some point, or are you trying to stay in this radio lane?
I did some TV like while I was in J school, or in journalism school. So like I have a bit of experience there. I haven't actually like worked in like real life broadcasting TV. But I would definitely be open and interested in like going back to or going to producing TV or trying it out. But like I said, yeah, it's definitely different because TV is a lot harder. It's harder in post production. I think radio is I wouldn't say harder. It's just a bit more complex in post production because you're working with images and sound. So literally you have to make sure like everything melds. In audio, you're just working in post production. You're only working with sound. So whatever that sound is, like wherever the audio is coming from, whatever the source of the sound is, it does like as long as it's all sound, then like you're only working in one medium. But TV, you have to be like watching the sound and then also looking at the images as well. But I think, it kind of offsets that complexity in radio because then in pre-production for radio, you have to make sure that you actually build out a story that like would have the same impact as if I was watching it on TV. So it kind of like balances out that way. But yeah, I think TV is something I would definitely be interested in like pursuing or going back to try at some point. I just can't see I can't see the pathway to going back there at this point. But yeah, it's definitely something I would like to try again.
Yeah, I'll say why I asked before, but I on talking about the complexity between video and audio, honestly, when we did this whole thing and decided to do video on this, Bernie is a very good editor. He's been doing things like audio editing. I don't know how much video editing he's done, but he seems to be good in all that shit. I need to learn. I'm very curious about it, honestly. I just haven't had time to, and I let the expert do it. At some point, I'm gonna do it myself, but that always interests me. And my next question was, the reason why I asked about visual is, you're a good writer. I don't know if you write nonfiction or if you write fiction. If you ever thought about producing something, show wise or story wise, or if you've ever written anything that you think can be produced to that extent, if that's something that ever crossed your mind. Because if I was able to write like you can, I would think of that. I don't know, just to put down something to convey my crazy mind or whatever I'm thinking about, and produce something. Has that ever crossed your mind at all?
Yeah, well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much. And I think I think all the time about I would love to write a TV show. Like, for example, those are just things I think about. So going back to writing, I would definitely want to write fiction in the future. Like right now, like you said, all I write is nonfiction. So it's mostly like analyses, personal essays, opinion style stuff. But it's very much rooted in obviously real life and things that are actually happening. But I would like to write fiction at some point. And that was actually what made me go to journalism school in the first place, was because I loved writing. Like even when I was young, I loved writing stories. I just loved and I always had a good I guess, relationship with words and like language. I've always just enjoyed it. So journalism school felt like the natural place to go, school wise. And then, yeah, like I said, the radio thing and writing kind of came after. So I think I would definitely be interested in doing like a TV show or like a play or something like somewhere in the future. But yeah, definitely something I've thought about.
Did
Yeah,
anyone
I
ever
would
say
think
to
so.
you? Did anyone ever say to you, "You have a radio voice"? Because there's that cliche thing that people go like, "You've got such a good voice." Radio. Did people ever say that to you? Like, is that a prerequisite to getting into radio?
Well, not if you're a producer. So you don't need to have a radio voice if you're a producer, because 9 times out of 10, no one hears you. Like producers are very, very much behind the scenes. That's why you see that stereotype of like journalists in TV shows who like they dress really shitty or like they don't really care what they look like, because it's a very kind of production is very often a very like self-effacing role. So you're not supposed to be like to show up, but in a lot of like like I just produced a documentary last week on black hair, and I actually voiced it. So it was like I was a part of the documentary, and like some of my personal stories and experiences were a part of the documentary.
Plug it.
That was, yeah. So you guys go listen to my black hair documentary, cbc.ca/ideas, and you'll see, yeah, it's all about black hair and the cultural and political history of black women's hair. So yeah, for that one, like, of course, that's a story that has some of my personal experiences like built into it. So it only made sense that I was kind of a part of the story in some way. So yeah, in that sense, I think you having like being able to present can be useful, but it's not a prerequisite for production, because for the most part, like people aren't expecting you to like jump on air.
I think this is a it's a good look into the background, because I think it's really, really cool, and especially when I think, was it last week Larry King died, and we all know how he's king of radio essentially, right? So it's a prominent time to have this discussion. But as well, and I'm so upset that I didn't say this in the beginning, happy Black History Year, because 2021, we're not just settling for a month, we're taking a year. And you were talking about black women's hair, I think, is a great place to talk about the things that you love to talk about on a regular basis, which is let me say black issues. Because when I was doing, I first noticed that you commented on one of our tweets, and I looked and I was like, okay. And I like very black things. Let me just put this way. Yes. And I'm reading through it, I'm like, I'm just going through the rabbit hole of your articles. I'm like, yes, give me more. I'm reading it, I'm loving it.
Nice.
And I was like, we have to do this because I want to dive in on a couple of things they've talked about. And before we get into the hair, which I think, at the end, let's just have that discussion, because I want my dad to listen to this episode and he'll get in trouble with my mom over that. But being in Toronto, and you mentioned you went to high school in Ottawa, off air, after seeing a lot of the recent things that have been going on in the United States, and there's a big, conversation about Trump and his fans and racism and this, that, and the other, we act as if racism either doesn't exist or is just not as bad.
As in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Can you talk about that a little bit, and just tell us what you think about that and your experiences, and let's have a real conversation around that.
Yeah. Okay. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because I live to correct this stereotype or this misconception that people have about Canada, because I think, and I think a lot of that, like I've written about this before, a lot of that is built up in Canada's image as like peaceful, of course, their diplomatic history, and the way that they've kind of positioned themselves like as a country, then of course has a lot of bearing on the way that they treat the citizens of said country, or the way that they're perceived to be treating the citizens of said country. So like we have open borders, and we have this like great, of course, history of diplomacy, and like we're very nice. Like everybody knows, like Canadians are like the nicest people ever. So all those, I think, all that builds up to, and then of course the very big, the S word, like the history of slavery in America is one thing that I think a lot of people are very aware of, but don't know about what that history looked like here, and that there was a very long and very very distinct history of slavery here in Canada. So the same things that were happening in the US were happening here. And because Canada is considered, like, it was the terminal, the final terminus of the Underground Railroad, which is like this route that many slaves took to freedom out of the US, like, people just assume that when they think about the conversations around slavery and Blackness, they assume that we're just this like benevolent, welcoming, like, we're just here to offer solutions and we're not part of the problem. But the reality is that Canada has been very much a part of, or has participated in white supremacy, in very long history of anti-Black racism in this country, that still continues today. And I think a lot of what we're seeing right now in the US, just in terms of kind of the widening of the political divide, like, all those things are happening here as well. So I don't underestimate just how toxic this environment can be for Black people. And I ask other people not to, because it creates a kind of, it creates a shelter, or it creates a
facade.
Yeah, it creates a facade that, like, this problem doesn't exist here, when it very much does. And even that facade in itself is almost as harmful as the actual violence and systemic racism that is being perpetrated against Black people. So the silencing aspect of it too is like a big thing. So yeah, like, I'm always kind of ready to just talk about the fact that there are problems here that need to get solved as well. And that we need to be having these conversations, like, and not comparing ourselves. Because yeah, in a lot of ways, like, we see, you know, shootings in the US happen of Black men all the time. Like, we see all these examples, and they're very visceral, and they're very real, and they're very, like, it's out there on the news, right? But here we don't have I don't think there's the same kind of global awareness of anti-Black incidences of anti-Blackness, the way, like, we can name a George Floyd, or a Tamir Rice, or a, you know, Mike Brown. Like, we know those are references that are easily accessible to anybody's cultural memory. But if I talk about, you know, somebody, a Black person here, like Andrew Loku, do either of you know that name?
I know about that one.
Yeah, because you're here in Canada, so you probably know about that. But Chindi, you probably
even then it takes a while, because you have to go.
Yeah.
Andrew Look. Okay. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's like those, you know, in that sense, like, you can really tell that I guess the PR machine for Canada is, like, working really well.
Over time.
Yeah. But at the same time, yeah, again, that silencing and that erasure of the very real anti-Blackness that people in this country face is, yeah, almost as harmful as the actual anti-Blackness itself. So
it's almost working overtime by not doing anything. Like, you know, living in Toronto, it's very easy to get, let me say, lost in your multiculturalism, right? Like, living in Toronto, my friends are from all over the place, right? And everyone seems to understand that what they do in America is bad, right? So everyone seems not racist. Let me put it that way. But when you go into the deep part, you know how you say deep South in America? You go into, like, the deep part of Canada, you can't escape that stuff anymore. That type of stuff there, you know, like the people who, like Don Cherry, who was a, you know, very famous hockey analyst and former coach, and he's saying racist things about immigrants on TV, but that represents what a lot of people actually do think. So when you branch out of Toronto, maybe Ottawa a little bit, you start to wonder and realize, what is this? This is not my experience. This is not the Canada that because I saw a Confederate flag when I was in Alberta. Just someone was driving around with a Confederate flag. And I was like, what is that? And I went to a bar, and it was only white people. And if you go to Calgary as a Nigerian and hang out with Nigerians, you might think, you know, this place is quite diverse. When you go into the place itself, it's not what you see here. Not to say that there's no racism here, there is, but we're masked from it because of our multiculturalism and all that.
Yeah.
It's not nice.
Yeah, I think the urban centers in Canada, and, like, the bigger cities where there is, like, a higher population of, like, you know, immigrants, for example, or, you know, people of, like, where there's a high diversity. I think people in those cities, are very much shielded from the realities. They are, in a sense, I think, from the more, like, just harsher realities of like being like the only, for example. So you're never going to be the only Black person anywhere in Toronto. Like that's just not going to happen. But there are places in Canada where you could find yourself being the only Black person. So in that sense, I think, yeah, the city, being in the big cities and the urban centers where you do find your kind, there, I think a lot of people are shielded from the reality of Canada, having this, a lot of racist attitudes. But I also think the cities like Toronto is like, there are racist people in Toronto, like the same things that we talk about and complain about and that we see on TV all the time, like they happen here too. It's just, I think people, again, like because we don't see the images in the way, like these strong, really painful, visceral images of like a man having a police officer's knee on his neck, or like things like that. We don't see it. We don't see that as much as we see it from the US. We do see things like that do happen here, and that is a fact. But because I think the national conversation about racism, specifically anti-Black racism, has not reached the level that it's reached in the US, it gives a lot of people an excuse to be ignorant about it and to act like, well, yeah, like Canada's just great.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think in general that is just a side effect of one, America stations itself as everything in the world, so everyone sees everything America is doing, and it's to some extent it's their fault because that's what they want. They want to be the image that the world sees and the gold standard, but also everything bad they do is there. Secondly, the Canadian, like we said, the facade that they project, and it's not their fault because the louder people in Canada are in the epicenters, and that's a multicultural part of it. And those people generally do not experience these things. Obviously, there's shootings in any urban area. I doubt that there's no like shooting, gunning down by police, stuff like that. No shootouts. That happens, but in general, it's hard for it to be just termed a racial shooting most times because that's just not the angle most people go. And then you look at a place like the UK where they have kind of the same, I would say the same issues as a Canada on that same level, but then again, they're saved by one not being able to carry guns, so people don't really die like that from police brutality. But theirs is the deepest kind of systemic racism because it's been inbred in their system from forever, like from when slavery stopped, because that's the first pit stop for most people, or they're the originators of slavery anyways, or the whole slave trade. So from back then, from their history and everything, it's ingrained in them to do things systemically that put the colored person down. So but either way, the point is America is the beacon because America wants to be a beacon for everything else. So they're the focus. But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, in my limited visits to, but not limited, I had a lot of visits to Toronto. I have had experiences with cops. It wasn't terrible.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't bad. We were speeding, so whatever. But I've had issues with cops. I do know that Buffalo, Canada border is the toughest one to go through, in my experience. The scrutiny, especially if you're holding green or red passport, is intense. Generally, going into Canada wasn't too bad, but I know that they would still tell us to come out of the car. All of us that were in the car come out, spend like an hour answering stupid questions. And then you go, and coming back into America is the same type of scrutiny. So yeah, it's not something that is uncommon for me. But then again, you're driving straight from Buffalo to Toronto, and you don't necessarily, in between, you don't meet what's going on, really. So, I mean, at the very least, you're in St. Catherine. And St. Catherine is not even that bad either. So, I don't know. It's honestly, the way I'm feeling about these happenings now in the world is indifferent, but not in the sense that I don't care what's happening to other people. It's like it's gonna happen. For my part, I haven't witnessed anything personally, and I hope it stays that way. I don't know how I would react if I get any kind of. But I'm in New York, so you know, it's like Toronto or like London. I don't expect necessarily, unless someone crazy does something, and if anyone does anything, generally you can count on the cops to do something about it. You know, generally. So there's no fear in that way. But the further you go out of places like this, you know.
Sometimes it's the microaggressions though. Like,
oh no, yeah, definitely.
I'm looking at, like, I was thinking about it. I'm like, okay, Tayo, seems very, very simple. I'll let you tell me how do they pronounce your name.
Don't even listen. I'm like, it's 4 letters.
Yep.
So I've had Tio. I'm on email. No, I think verbally, I'm like, I'll let you mess it up one time, and then once I tell them the first time, usually they're fine. But on email, I'm like, you saw it. You literally could have just copy pasted, but oh no, you had to just, and even not going back to, like, for me, I'm a journalist, so I work with like words a lot. I'm sending emails, like 100 emails a day. I'm like, listen, even not doing the work of going back to spell check your email and make sure you got that person's name right, that is a microaggression. Like, it doesn't have to be malicious. It doesn't have to be, like, it just means that you didn't care, or you didn't care to take the time to go back and make sure that you showed that person that respect. And I think, those microaggressions be real. And I think here, like in Canada, they might be kind of, because also too, like, because, and I won't, like, I'll be honest, the kind of image in terms of like politeness that Canadians have is true to an extent. But I think that also breeds a lot of like passive aggressiveness. And I think that like those microaggressions you're just talking about manifest in a lot of like passive aggressive ways, where it's like somebody is not being like outrightly like, like saying something rude or saying something racist, but it's like, oh, is that like, do you have another name that I could call you? Because that's kind of hard. Like, it's that type of shit. And it's just like, no, I need to learn my name, or we're not going to talk. Like, it's that type of thing, always with a smile. No, like, that's silly microaggression.
It was funny when Anila posted on Twitter about this name thing, and Bernie commented on my comment. It's like, first of all, any Russian person's last name, they get it spot on. Like, the first spelling, you can have whatever she, whatever on the name, and they get it first time. But like, it's very simple. Like, just listen to what I'm saying and repeat it. It's very easy. But no, you have to do it your way, or say, no, I'm going to call you Adam or whatever. Like really, it's crazy.
It's to make the effort, right? Like, it's at least make the effort, and the other one. And just because Tayo works in media, I'm very curious to hear. Do you ever get you speak English so well?
You're so well spoken. Okay, so thankfully you're so articulate. So thankfully I like work at a corporation. Like, I'm around a group of people who like would literally die like if they heard that somebody said something like that to me. So thankfully, like, I've been blessed to not have to deal with like that type of condescension, and it is racism. But I know so many people who have had that experience where it's like, oh, you're surprised that like my English is so good, or you're surprised that like I'm good at my job, or they just like refuse to believe that like you're capable of doing certain things, like just because of what you look like. Like, even as I was doing my Black hair documentary, like so many of the, I guess, facts that I found that were non-hair, that were hair related, but also non-hair related. Like, they did this study, I think it was University of California did a study about just like perceptions of Black hair and how they impact, like real life impacts that they have on Black women, which we know, of course, that Black women are more likely to be told that they look like unprofessional, or to be asked to like change their hairstyles. But they had real numbers of like women with tighter curls than looser hair texture were more likely to be seen as unprofessional, or were more likely to be seen as like incapable of doing their jobs, like even down to the curl in a person's hair. And I have to go back and fact check that, make sure it was actually UCLA, or University of California, but I'll make sure like of who said that. But there was a study that came out last year that, yeah, it was like down to even like something that you would think that for us, because we're so used to this context, we may not notice the difference, because some people, even within our community, we still have these issues. But it's like, to be able to tell a Black woman you can't do your job because your hair is in dreadlocks, like that just is like, seriously. So things like that still happen all the time.
That's amazing. I think like even down to, I believe they require people to do IELTS or whatever the hell that exam is, the English as second language.
Oh yeah, IELTS, yes, yep.
So now my question is this, right? It's world knowledge that certain countries speak English natively, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're ignorant, Nigeria is one of those countries. I would think a Canadian should know that, because Canada and Nigeria share the same colonizers. So why the hell is that a prerequisite to do your citizenship or to do your perm resident or whatever? Even when I came to college, they made us take an English course to see where they'll place us. They made us take English and math, like in the first week or something. But they did it to all international students. They did it to, actually, you know what? No, let me not say that, because I think me and Obina argued our case, and they didn't disagree with us that we speak English natively. So they didn't force us to. But I know that Cameroonians, they did, which makes sense. They speak French. Some of them do. And any French speakers, Spanish speakers, stuff like, they did it. But it's not always the case. Some people are forced to do it because you just come from Nigeria and they'll make you do it. I don't remember us taking it. I might have to ask Obina that, but I believe we fought our way out of taking that exam. But it's like crazy. Like, it's, first of all, is the lack of effort to check people's backgrounds and what the rules are, where they come from, and what it means. You know, it's even down to asking, do you have, you know, I was going to say animals roaming the streets, but we do have sometimes. Do you have?
Are we dealing with that right now?
do you live in huts, or, you know, stuff like, it's just very stupid. Like, the lack of awareness of the world is very embarrassing. And I mean, I've gone to the point where I just laugh at this point, but it's very, very sad. I mean, and I guess it's just very sad. Us as Nigerians, and then again, let me not even say that as Nigerians, because Nigerians we know are like less than 2% of Nigerian population, so we shouldn't generalize. But I would think that generally anyone that goes to school in Nigeria knows a lot about the world compared to someone that goes to school in America knows about the world. You know, just on basic level. Even any kid in some school in Ibadan learns about somewhere else that they've never been before, and they probably
or
never
even
will
if they're
go.
not learning it, like even if they're not learning it in school, like they're watching it on TV,
Exactly,
right? Like like America, I think, very much lives in Canada similarly, but maybe slightly less so. But I think America in particular lives in its own like cultural silo, where it's just like they don't care to know or learn about anything that's outside of their own like historical and cultural context.
Yep.
And then even when you think about like the ways that we learn things like outside of the academic context, so for example, the things we absorb through popular media or pop culture, or the music we listen to, the TV we watch, like if you think about back home, how many of the channels on like DSTV, for example, are dedicated to like Nigerian content versus like,
I mean, it's getting better now.
Movies. Yeah, now it's a lot better. But if you think like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, like there were 2 African Magic channels. That was it. And everything else was like you were watching the rest of the world. You in America, how many Nollywood channels do they have?
We actually used to feel like, you know, watching your own stuff was almost degrading if you think about it. Like no one would say this, but like, you know, like the Nigerian movies, like my mom would go, when we lived in Oman, she would go back to Nigeria and come back with like a bag full of Nigeria, you know, the CDs and everything. And like we would never bring those out in front of like my white friends, for instance. Like, why would I do such a thing?
Yeah.
But now, for some reason, because of Netflix, and I guess my like non-Nigerian friends are like, oh my god, I watched this movie. It was so good. And I'm like, what movie did you watch? Wedding Party. Wow.
But yeah, you're right, man. Like it's terrifying and amusing in some way, but like now, I guess it's a good thing with the internet. It's a good thing with globalization right now. There's very few people that can tell you they've never heard of a certain place before, or like certain people before. So now, everything's accessible. Like you said, Netflix has a branch of Nigerian movies, a branch of Ghanaian movies, a branch of that is intertwined with. I mean, sometimes you have to search, but in general, any regular Netflix surfer can see a Nigerian movie.
Yeah.
If they go to the right corner of Netflix, right? So it's interesting, but yeah, it's the worst thing you can get is, oh, you're from Nigeria. I didn't. You speak very good English. I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah. That's what I learned in. Like you, I was born speaking English. So like what do you mean?
Or people, I've met people who actually didn't know that Nigerians like spoke English, that like it was our, like that everyone knew. Well, and not to say like there are people who like live in their own ethnic like centers who like primarily like their first language isn't English, but for the most part, like most people in Nigeria speak English. Like it's not Spain. So people, I don't know what language. So I'm like, okay, what language do you think people in Nigeria speak? Like there's so many tribes, but there's so many ethnic groups, and all that. And it's like they haven't even given it a thought. Like they haven't even considered what the or like what
They
other
don't care.
option. Yeah, because they don't care. Yeah.
They don't care. But yeah, that's always interested me, and it's a sad situation. But I think as the world is expanding more, things are changing. Definitely, there's no choice but to change, and just hopefully the whole world comes along with it. I think that also, I think the expansion of the world and the growth of blackness and generally Africanness also brought with it this increase in white reactions and supremacy. If you think about it, the only reason why it's going up is because, in my estimation, they feel like nothing is theirs anymore. At least that's what they say. So that's probably the source of the frustration, even just down to politics and left and right and all that. It's feeling underrepresented and feeling like everything you own is going away. And it's funny to watch because it is going away. I'm sorry, but we're growing and we're flourishing, and you're not stepping on anyone anymore. There's a level playing field, and now our excellence, or at least our ability to achieve, is coming to the fore. So it's scary for some people, but they'll deal with it.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think a lot of Americans, like you said, they have like a lot of this white nationalist sentiment comes from a place of insecurity about their position in society. And I think a lot of white Americans are just very reminiscent of, like right now, especially with, the rise of these populist movements and like Donald Trump and the growth of his base and all those types of conversations now coming into the mainstream, where before like these people would be hiding in their dark web forums, like talking about this stuff and not being able to bring that to the mainstream. But now, of course, you have a president who, calls African countries shitholes, or an ex-president, and God, who calls African countries shitholes and who, just is completely like unpresidential. I think there's white Americans, a lot of white Americans are feeling more emboldened to be their true selves, which is to perpetrate and exist in white supremacy. And I think a lot of white Americans are also they're missing the good old days of slavery. That's what they're missing, the good old days of when Black people were they're still systemically oppressed, but where there could be actual like an outward expression of that within the citizenry. So where I could just say to you, like, you ain't shit because of the color of your skin, and have that be the norm. in the mainstream conversation. I think a lot of people are like wanting to take America back to those days, which sucks. But I'm hoping, like, I don't know, I hope now that Trump is out and like we'll be back to I saw on Twitter somebody was like, oh, we're going back to normal racism now, not this,
Yeah, I saw that.
not this hyped up, not this hyped up version. So like,
we know how to deal with normal racism. We're like, we understand this.
Yeah, that type of racism we can deal with. But
I think it'll take a while. I think it will die down at some point, but I think it'll take a while. But then again, some of the elements that have awoken will stay.
Oh yeah.
In some form. Especially if they're now getting to the point where they're trying to get into government. It'll keep getting crazy to some extent. But at the same time, their opposing forces also go into government too. So hopefully, things level out. But yeah, Bernie, if you wanted to say something else.
Yeah, I was gonna say let's talk about something that in our culture can be political, can be social, can be controversial, and it's the source of your latest work that you plugged in the beginning. Is it the Tangled Roots Decoding Black History of Black Hair?
So
is that you? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So guys, check that out. Tangled Roots Decoding the History of Black Hair. You can just Google that and you'll find it. This one is very interesting. It has caused fights in my own house. And then not my house here, my parents. Angela Davis, her afro was a statement against white supremacy in her mind. Some people believe that straightening your hair is an acceptance of white beauty standards. True or false?
So I think that the origins of hair straightening are very much rooted in Eurocentric and white beauty standards, which again require that all women be like slim and long haired and have straight hair and be, beautiful in the way that society considers people to be beautiful. So I think the origins of Black women straightening their hair, which goes, all the way back to, the decades just following slavery. Again, all that is rooted in white supremacy and in Eurocentric beauty standards. I think that today, a lot of us, of course, still indulge in that. I still straighten my hair all the time. I don't see that as I don't see that as an acceptance of white supremacy. I think you have to have an understanding and it's always important to have an understanding or an awareness of like where the cultural and political history of certain practices. But I don't think that every act of like straightening your hair or like wearing a weave or, wanting to look in a certain way can be defined as accepting white supremacy. I think, again, for a lot of women, just on a practical basis, like styling your hair does take a certain amount of work and effort. It's an amazing thing. It's a beautiful thing. I love my Black hair. I want all Black women to love and appreciate and nurture their hair. But I do think there's like a practicality element to it, whereas like I'm not going to do a twist out every day. Like I'm not going to deep condition my hair and then have to come out to do a lot of steps. So if I have to do a protective style, throw on a wig just to get through the week, or even just to switch up my aesthetic, because again, Black women are magical. Listen, we are multifaceted. We can become anything that we want to be, and I don't think that is, again, is always rooted in an acceptance of white supremacy. Sometimes we just be doing our thing, and it's unfortunate that, again, it does tie in with that unfortunate history. But I think, again, an understanding and an awareness of where some of these practices or where some of our ancestors may have started these practices from is rooted in that very painful history. But I think today we can be a bit easier on ourselves in terms of how we engage with our hair.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah. I agree. And what do you think? Because it's interesting, because I know some people that are very, very passionate about this subject. And I find it very interesting that people even decide, for me as a guy, I'm like, don't ask me. I don't think my opinion matters. Personally, this is just for us to give people information based on you. And there are some people who are just so adamant that, if we're mad that, white people are appropriating hairstyles, the Kardashians or whatever, then how can we take that stance when we quote unquote do the same? I don't think it makes sense, but I think your comment would be good because I think you're more eloquent and you did this whole thing. So
yeah, I think that's whole false equivalence is very unfortunate that people are still peddling that line of thought, because me doing a weave doesn't, for example, me, I have a weave right now, which is straight and kind of mimics what
it looks good,
European
by the
hair
way.
would look like. Thank you. Thank you. And it does mimic what European hair would look like, but me engaging in this or doing this hairstyle doesn't have the same impact politically that somebody like Kim Kardashian or a white person taking a black hairstyle would have, because again, the power dynamics in those two scenarios are completely different. Like we just talked about before, black women are literally being discriminated against. If you guys, you'll hear this in the documentary, but the Crown Act is a new law that has gone into effect in about 7 states in the US, and it basically says and outlines that hair-based discrimination, so what we talked about before, your boss telling you that you can't wear dreadlocks to work, is in fact race-based discrimination, because hair is a quality that is, so for so long we've always thought about race as just skin color, but race encompasses a lot of things that aren't just the color of your skin, that also include the way we present and the way we show up in society, and that includes your hair. So again, if we have to create laws to tell white people that you cannot discriminate against people because of what their hair looks like, then I'm sorry, that's me doing a protective hairstyle, or putting on a wig or doing a weave to protect my hair in the winter isn't the same thing as Kim Kardashian doing box braids when black women are being told they can't come to work with box braids. I'm sorry, it's not the same thing. So again, an awareness and an understanding of the history of where some of these things come from is important. That's why I did the documentary, and that's why I really enjoy having conversations like this. But at the same time, we have to be honest with ourselves about the fact that these things don't work the same way in reverse. Nobody is going to nobody's going to shun, Kim Kardashian gets praised, and she even very often gets credit for a lot of these hairstyles, when black women who either invented them are not getting the credit or are being discriminated against in larger society because of it. So again, it's a false equivalence, and I think that people really need to, what you need to look at is not the apples and oranges, is the power dynamic, the power structures in each scenario, and that's what really I think makes the difference.
Not to go down this topic, and we don't even need to discuss it. I'm not sure how it links, but in my mind, I'm thinking the same way a white person can say, well, can accuse a black person of using the word, and say that, you can't. If you say it's a bad word, why do you use it? And if it's not a bad word anymore, why can't we use it? And it's no, 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 and no, and never no, and never yes, and whatever. And yes, we reclaim the word. Yes, it doesn't mean the same thing to us, but if you open your mouth and say it, still means the same thing. So just don't do it. So it's the same thing, and same trying to own everything, essentially. Same trying to police everything. Same trying to let everyone know what they can and cannot do. That's essentially what they want to do, and it's not gonna fly anymore, thankfully. So yeah.
I love the concept of power structures. I think that's the real key that you mentioned. That was really good, because you think about it but you don't think about it, and that's really the difference, right? Because we still have this power imbalance, you can't say that word to me.
Yeah, because in reality, we may not be in slavery times or in Jim Crow, when the word originated, but in the world that we live in today, you still occupy a position of privilege, or you still occupy a position that is privileged by virtue of the color of your skin, that allows you certain things that black people are not entitled to. And I think when you for white people, like invoking that word just again re-invokes the same power structures that were at play when that word was invented. So yeah, again, like you said, no, 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 and never yes.
And what do you want, or what would someone get, just what are you hoping that people take home from listening to your documentary? Like, what are you hoping to pass along to listeners?
I just I want people to like know way more about like this history, because I learned so much as I was doing like conducting interviews and doing research and stuff. Like I learned so much about my own hair. I learned so much about the history of the natural hair movement. I learned so much about like even just the again like the socio-politics of like what it means to have black hair, and what it means to be a black person, in like largely what it means to be a black person. But a lot of what I guess my main thesis, that I was coming at the documentary with was, if you look at the history of black hair, and how like the conversation around black hair has shifted from like pre-imperial African society, when black hair was a form of identity and everybody had their hair constantly done in one style or the other because it was a way that people knew who you were, where you came from, what was going on in your life like in that moment. And when you think about how the story, like the journey or the story of black hair has changed to, the conversations we're having today about like cultural appropriation and power imbalances and like what it means to be, to occupy this body as a black person and have part of your culture basically essentially stolen from you. And then have people tell you, well, you guys are doing it too. Like when you look at the trajectory of that story, it also in a lot of ways reflects the story of black people ourselves, and how the journeys that we have taken throughout history, coming from pre-imperial Africa, being brought, many of our like ancestors being brought to the Americas, and all the changes that have happened throughout history until now. Like if you look at the story of how black hair and how we talk about black hair has changed, a lot of it tells you what was like the story of black people themselves. So I really just wanted this to be a way for people to kind of learn a little bit more about their own history, but to also know like this isn't just like about a hairstyle or aesthetics. Like this is something that affects us in real life. And yeah, so just to get people to know a bit more about that.
I'll definitely put it in our description
Thank
so
you.
people can see it. I'm looking forward to listening to it. I like listening to random things as I work anyways, and this is not random, so I have to pay attention actually. So is it out fully?
It is out, yeah. So the audio is all online and you guys can listen. Yeah, and there's an article as well to if you want to just read about stuff. And yeah, I put in like a lot of information, like additional information in the article as well, if people want to read that.
Very nice, very nice. Do we have time to talk about your favorite topic, Bernie?
Yes, we have a couple of minutes to talk about Kanye. You wrote an article about how his gospel music is disingenuous. Please take the floor, have at it. I will join you.
I feel like I was just going to say like Kanye needs to have several seats, but like I think at this point, listen, I'm not going to maybe kick him too much. I won't kick him too hard. I'll kick him, but I won't kick him too hard when he's down right now, with this whole divorce situation. But I think, yeah, again, like Kanye is Kanye. Like Kanye has always been somebody who is, I think, extremely self-involved and possibly narcissistic. And I think that this kind of move, yes, I'm just being very careful with my language because I know that he also, of course, has his own struggles with like mental health, and things like that. So I know that that in itself is context that is important to know when we talk about like Kanye. Sorry, I think Bernie's frozen again. So I'm like, should I wait?
No, continue.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So I think he has been through his mental health struggles. So that is context that is important for people to know when talking about Kanye and his antics. But like I said, yeah, Kanye is somebody who has always been extremely self-involved, I think narcissistic. And I think this shift toward gospel music was just a way for him to, yeah, again, like reassert himself as like this revolutionary who was like doing something new and incredible. Like they're on this weird ranch and like these people are singing that he hasn't paid till now.
Yeah, it's not
but
paid
anyway,
That's mad. That's mad.
So, yeah, like it's all those things. Like these are the things that tell me like this is you're fake. Like because for you to be doing something in the name of God, but you're not paying the people who are doing it, like
Yeah.
it's a little bit. But also, I think the timing of the whole like his whole, I guess, Jesus moment, come to Jesus moment was also very, I think, very transparent in terms of what his motivations were, because this was a time when everybody was shitting on Kanye for basically being a MAGA fan, a MAGA fanboy, and you were with Trump, you supported Trump, you helped him, kind of, I think he did give him some legitimacy with a lot of Black people who were on the fence about Donald Trump. I think Kanye contributed to, them eventually falling to, the side of supporting Trump. And I think, yeah, Kanye recognized that like his fan base, which is Black people, which in a lot of ways is, and we know the cultural significance of the church when we talk about Black people in America.
Yeah.
I think he looked at what he was dealing with at the time. He looked at his public profile and he was like, I need to do something right now to win these people back because I'm losing them. And this his whole like gospel album thing was just like one way of saying, hey guys, like I'm still one of you, even though I'm going to wear a red hat and act like a clown. So to me, it was fake.
Yeah. Isn't there something about how every album of his is accompanied by some stunts? Some crazy stunts. Obviously there was the 50 and him thing, but I know that every other one has had something weird. I mean, maybe not the early ones, but of recent, at least his last three have had some kind of weird thing going on with it that accompanied or preceded the album. I just found it funny. And like you said, a pretentious person looking for attention, and that's definitely narcissistic. There's no two ways about it. And just wants all the attention. Anyone that thought he was really doing it for any real religious reason is not seeing the full picture. I mean, no, there's nothing to me that told me, even from what they were actually doing, like the gospels they were singing, and to me, it just was a different realm. It wasn't pure to me. It was never felt like genuine. Never felt like I could actually listen to that gospel music and sit down and reflect, because that's what you're supposed to do. I would never feel that way in listening to what they were doing. So to me, it was all a sham from the beginning. And to see now that, so he's not doing it anymore, right? It suddenly stopped, right? Or
it stopped, because he has not paid the people that were singing.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
they hope like Kanye, billion.
Yeah, like these are the same things like that just honestly drive me crazy when we talk about like people who have the profile and I guess level of like wealth and access that people like Kanye do, because when they like that can really be either a weapon, which I think in his own case, he allowed that to become a weapon against his own people when he decided to side with Trump. Or it could be really used for something good. But I think every decision that Kanye made along the way was for himself, and it wasn't really for the people who have made him the person he is. And that's just sad.
Definitely.
I hope my internet lets me get this point out, but I think it's very important where the message comes from. Because people made all these statements like, because we know Trump doesn't know the Bible. We know that. He said it himself. And they're like, oh, but he's on our side. So, he's progressing the message. And Kanye is progressing the message. And God can use whoever. I'm like, if you actually read this thing, it's not how this thing works.
It's not how this works at all.
That is not how that works. Evil, narcissistic people don't just carry the gospel around. That's not how this works. If you actually know it and care about it, especially as a Black person who wants to be on the right side of the issues and the truth. But
like, it's funny. It's funny. Moving away from Kanye briefly. Like, when we look back at the last 4 years, it's just comical upon comical, like crazy. Like, the image of him, first of all, beating the shit out of people to carry a pathway for him to go to that church, outside the White House, and then literally to go there and what he just stand and hold the Bible, like what does him doing that signify? Like
Upside down.
even for the evangelists, what does that show you? Like, what is that
What
saying
does
to
that
you?
signify? Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what does that say? Even for people that were saying blessings from Africa, Africa, what exactly did that Bible photo shoot show you? Like nothing. It was
Mhm.
empty. Like everything he does, empty. Like the people that needed stuff in Puerto Rico, and he went and was doing jumpers with the tissue.
Shooting.
I'm like, bro,
People are dying.
like, wow,
No, I can't. I can't. Like you just reminded me of that. I completely got that out of my memory because I was like, no,
bro.
not.
Like honestly, as I said, when we look back at this, when we are like, when Kaima is 12, 13, I'm telling her, look,
Yeah.
a few years ago, this guy was president and he
Mhm.
was a shit show. It'll be like comedy, like wow.
Yeah.
Like when they
Yeah.
teach history, are they gonna have a picture of Trump doing jumpers with tissue paper in our
Yeah.
kids' history books? I
I
hope they
know.
have that chapter in
They
there.
have to, they have to, they have to, they
So,
have
like,
to.
well, knowing the way that history, again, who gets to tell what history is and who gets to, I guess, compile legitimate versions of history,
Mhm.
we've seen that they are very often don't tell the full story or don't give the full picture. So
That
I
is
wouldn't be
true.
surprised. But
That is
again, I
true.
think right now the collective memory is like overrides everything else. Like nobody's going to forget that
I
shit
think that's the
anytime
thing.
soon.
I think that's the thing. I think we're at in general in the world today, we're at a point where a lot of things don't go unchecked, or at least people don't miss the opportunity to comment on stuff. In
Mhm.
general, things may die down quicker than you would expect, but at the very least, it will get mentioned. What just popped up to my head was Ti and Tiny. How is all quiet now, but a few weeks ago it was all the rage. But
Yeah.
it always gets pointed out, always gets called on, always gets called out somehow. So that's why I feel like going forward, and especially the generation after us, are worse at calling people out. Like when I say worse, I mean they're better. Like
Mm.
any chance to humiliate someone, it could be bad, but like any chance to make someone bring them down from their perch, they
Mhm.
take it. And in some ways, they do it very readily, and sometimes without looking at the consequences. So some people get taken down that are not supposed to be, or they overdo it, or they speak too loudly, and then it goes away instead of being gradual with it. But either way, it comes out. So I'm hopeful in that sense that government life generally is gonna go towards that pathway. You're being watched more now, and you can get called out at any point for anything.
Mhm.
So better watch yourself. I think
Mhm.
that's the path we're going down, unless things take a turn in society. I think that's where society is going, because we're going from our millennials generation, where we all feel like 50-year-olds at 25, and we're working very hard, to the generation after us, who pretty much have everything going for them. They're born in the technology age. Everything's getting better faster as they're growing older. Access is there for everything, and they don't give a shit. They don't care. They act like things are just there for them. They're not really taking care of stuff, but
Mm.
they're quick to call stuff out still, though. So I think the activism will go up, but I don't know how much it'll last. I don't know if it's just fleeting. Anything will get called out. I just don't know how long it'll be a movement. That's the only
Mm.
thing I'm worried about. So, but anyways, we'll see. We'll be here to see in Jesus' name.
Mhm.
Anyways,
Amen.
so,
Amen. Amen.
but
To that
yeah,
point, Tayo, thank you for
thank you
joining us.
so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank you guys for
telling
having
our
me.
stories. Thank you
Sorry,
Thank
guys.
for
Sorry about that, guys.
all
No
good.
worries.
I was about to be really gracious. It's all good.
Well,
Listen,
thank you.
thank you for telling our stories, especially here in Canada. This is a really important mission that you're on, and I hope that people learn. Hope that people listen to the documentary. Guys, just Google her, and you'll see a lot of great articles. we need more Black people to tell our stories, and she's leading the way. So we are appreciative of you coming on our show. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, guys. This was
Thanks
so
a
much
lot.
fun. It was great to be here.
We love conversations like this, so we really appreciate you coming on. If you know anyone as interesting as yourself that we should talk to, please to recommend. We know you listen to the pod, so we appreciate that. And those what do you call it? Advertisers, because we want more people to hear us. We wanna have a bigger audience, and we want to talk about more substantial, good things like this. Things that are relevant to us as two young dads, obviously, but to our society. So, any recommendations? But in general, thank you for coming. Thank you for complimenting our pod in the first place. And we appreciate it. So,
yeah, you guys are doing great, and this was so much fun. So thank you for this space. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Okay, take
Have
care.
a good night. Bye.
Bye.
Great.
All right, that was a good one.
Very, very good. Very educational. I like stuff like that.
Guys, if you're still here at the end of this, mine's the worst it's ever been, and I apologize for that. I already called the internet company to come and fix this thing.
Bro, I've told you, do Ethernet till then, if you can.
My thing is upstairs.
I know. Okay.
So I have to figure out a way to get it down.
Tell them you might need another router so you can plug it in and then plug into the router. That's the best way. Because otherwise, trust me, I always plug it in. If not, I know I'm going to be fucked. So
yeah, I have to figure that out.
I'm sure you'll be able to. I'm sure you'll be able to edit most of it out. But anyways, guys, we thank you for joining us in this episode. This was very good. We like to educate, as you guys know. We like to bring interesting people on. So we hope you guys enjoyed that. Yeah, Bernie, have a good night.
My man, take it easy. We'll talk soon.
Peace.
Welcome to the Talk Shop.